Lecção.
Sorry. Yeah, tininga tsongo zikjaka.
Oh, okay, so now we are going to start.
Sammal sampreji dile.
Okay, so I want to greet everyone with Tashi Dele. Hello.
Tani tanga tso tanda semjong ni se chevi semjong ngap chi ke dechen chinro sani ta dechen nin ro sari pendrong na yengi ngan ni ta gya chi nal le ore.
Yes, so now we are talking about the among the mind and the mental factors. So now we reach to talk about the mental factors. So among the mental factors, there are 51 mental factors, and we already covered the first two sections of the mental factors. So now we are going to start the third section, which is engaging with the 11 virtuous mental factors.
Oti dewa chachchi kanani kedo nanchu na ka sa enten dewa ndi ngeng zara telan dewa chi ga na ji yon chak la nanchu na la gewa che ya chi yore ta ta kam de ti la semjong gewa chachchi ni te pe ti lokare ngeng gewa che ga na li ta nga ta ye ge gewa cha ma she yore ndo wa le shi ba kyang kyang re shi ba na ni semjong ba ji re.
Yes, so in general, in the Buddhism, so there is the presentation of what is called the term virtuous section. But this is actually very different because here, in this context, we are mainly talking about the mind. All these 11 mental factors, virtuous mental factors, are concerned with the mind.
Na sa tani
Okay, please come in.
Tani ka sa gewa chachchi na ni chachchi ko tombo tepa ze de atan ro sa ni ta tiri ni pa ngosa shi pa ta samba che yo pa te nyam de ju ja ka ya.
So we already started the section of the virtuous mental factors, and we already covered the first one, which is the fate. And now we are going to talk about the shame and embarrassment. We are going to present them together as part of the 11 virtuous mental factors.
Sonza ta tiringa ni nga tso ngo tsa shi pa ta che yo pa ngo ni man ro ndi ke ta ngo tsa shi pa ta che yo pa ya te nga tso ro me se ta sili na yo re la te kyon len zembi ge sam lo chi re ke ta kyon ge chol.
Yeah, so in general, the mental factors, shame and embarrassment. So if we are talking about them in general, these are mental factors which their essence is to kind of shun or to avoid a certain type of negative action.
Kyon len zem na kar ze or nga so na ge ha kore sem ge na ni control za de ando chal che de cha to che de la so kyon te so che nan ge ma re san nin zem to che ya li ge go ni so che pa la so pi te so len zem to che wa ani na ge go ni mil cha ze shin go ko tan ten che ya te so kyon te so len zem de ni sam lo ni re de ni.
Yeah, so these are kind of attitudes which kind of avoid or shuns like the different kind of faulty action or negative actions. And what are these negative actions? So we can talk about it from the perspective of body, speech or mind. So from the perspective of mind, it will be like the different kind of negative actions such as generating states of mind of anger, jealousy, attachment, and so forth. And from the perspective of the body, these actions will be such as killing, stealing. And from the perspective of the speech, this will be like kind of a certain speech that is to deceive other people or to lie to other people. So these mental factors, those are which have like the attitude of kind of avoiding engaging these kind of negative actions.
Yena yang kuni chaban ra wata ke tan ni le nga so chabar che ore ma che na chi pan ro ngo sa shi pa ze de at so chi bo yena yang jamba jin se che ma so jin se che ba nge sem le control as op samba so po ke de na nga ro control te le no re nga ro ma ke pa zo gres ani mil so che pa la so pa ten chi na yang jamba le ka nge che gres e kya ze che pa la so pi linga ka kyon ten ji kuma ja la so pa ten chi na ya po yo mar sa ni so jin sen te che ni kyon len zem de at le ngo sa shi pa la de ore.
Yes, but still there is difference between what we call shame and embarrassment, these two mental factors. So as for the first one, the mental factor of shame, so what is kind of unique for this mental factor is that one is avoiding a certain faulty or negative actions by the reason, like through the reason of oneself, like thinking of oneself. And what does it mean? It means that, for example, one is avoiding generating states of mind like such an anger or harming other people by the reason of oneself. For example, thinking, or if I'll get angry, it will harm my own health. It will make my mind unhappy. If I'll engage in action such as killing or like doing different type of faulty or negative action, this is something that eventually is going to harm me. So like thinking through this kind of, having these kind of thoughts, it's unique for the first mental factor, which is shame.
So tani che yo pa the daily there's duazia merata ta che yo pa ze mi te so gon sa ta ruksa ta mi te so ha ko sal le di che de na ya ko yo mari mi te so ngal kyon cho yung ri chi che re sam nin zem de atma to so gem sem ma chini gem se jambal chini ta teli doni jamba ha ma ko man ton sal ya kyon te so te jing ro ge tin ri na tel che yo ta ngo cha me ze ya chang ro re ta ki so gem se chini pe ti sa wa ni ko na ngo cha shi ba ze ya tre ko ni japan ro te tin ri ma to ni cha kyon len zem ke ko sam lo im ba chi bare.
Yeah, so these two mental factors are the same in the sense of avoiding engaging in negative action or like in faulty types of action. But as we said, so the first one is mainly by thinking of the reason of oneself, like how it will affect oneself and so forth. And the second one, embarrassment, it is mainly by the reason of like the others, because it has like this type of attitude of thinking, oh, if I'll do like this or this type of action, what the other people will say about me, like how the other people will be satisfied or not satisfied with me. Having like this kind of state of mind and avoiding like negative action. So this is the meaning of embarrassment. And this is the difference. Like both of them have the function of avoiding negative actions, but the difference is what the reason.
So Javan de Nita Lale Tertona, and the Mitsama Koyatre Mier of Jozanzia, the Chukele Maling Kachamarin, the Lurizia, the Chukele Maling Kachayomarim, Roa Mitsama, Yonjoshi goes on. At the Mier of Jozantanichi chart, think about in the Nilale Yawatertona?
Yes, so in general, if we can engage like in such practice of shame and embarrassment, this is something which is not necessarily related directly to practicing a certain kind of religion or spiritual practice. This is not something that has to be related to this kind of practice, religious practice. Actually, this is something that in general, in the society, if someone has like this kind of mental factors, shame and embarrassment, so one is considered to be very, very well behaved or like very good person. Like, and this is something that we can think about as something which is related to the general livelihood of people, something which is necessary.
Tani Pache Konin Jackson, Tiwatala, Nabian gave some Zeatan, Docha me patan, Jerdan me patan, the moon may be guest some Zeachu.
Yeah, so now I'm going to talk about the three other types of mental factors, the three following mental factors, the non-attachment, non-hatred, and non-ignorance. Factors.
Tani, not so true, not to know what chain attended Docha me pata give a jaguar carrizen and Docha Zidiat, Magiva Sedegore, Tachens on Island, Docha Magiva Kyundra, Sigi on the Menahako Munduta, Jedan, the Kins yon down Jedan may be guessed at Docha, the Jedan rete, Kins on all Kyun Barry, the moon may be good as a theatre, the moon lost of the mutter, the Muziat not so momba, Mishipata Jade or Mishipazete, Kunchimora, Docha on the Janet and
Yes, so what is the reason that we consider like these three, the non-attachment, non-hatred, and non-ignorance to be something which is a virtuous mental factor? So what is the reason? The reason is that the opposite are considered to be something which is faulty or something which is a negative or non-virtuous. So if you are talking about attachment, so I don't know actually how it is considered like in society, whether it is something which is faulty or not, but in general we can say that this is something which is a non-virtuous. And as for hatred, of course that we can all recognize it as something which is faulty and negative. Like, and then as for ignorance, of course, as well, we can also recognize it as something which is negative and faulty. So since this, the opposite of this virtuous mental factor is negative, so we consider these to be virtuous, the all this.
라서 다 동보 노참에 비게사 카르제나 콘서 초콘디노라 사파다 스피 요차라 무니 텔라 젬발로차 니발라 문지 비스텐체피 셈종젠도 다테카르 라워레티 사파다 스피 요차제티 스피 요차제디아다 타초근 통데야다 소레 사파제티 나추나는 코라 케차치 요레다 타 카운터 아초가 자얀 통야 고양 컴바 안디 요차 참말 스피 요차제디 워레 타초르 젬발로파제티 타초르 노파 하창 쳔보메치니 칸 종아테 대삼군 르그레다 텔리 아창고군도 산니 슈 만지가다 테니 텔레테니 페나 도파 체왈라 테니 Ramanda Jauri Jami or Kama Jami or in Ramadan Dopachina, Ramanda Leka Chegra Tangasu, Zamulung Yotam Samata, Dopachevalatini Yungu or is a word is on the Tilly Dot and Dopa Chonjon Cheto, Tendri Sam Logicla, Dochame Pigas has in Italy Lavore. Matras.
Yes, so now we're going to read the definition of the non-attachment. So the definition of non-attachment is a mental factor that, having observed samsaric existence and what is needed to lead such existence, reverses attachment to them and functions as a basis for not engaging in bad conduct. So what does it mean actually? So when we are saying that here it's written having observed samsaric existence and what is needed to lead such existence. So what is needed to lead such existence? We can also understand it like the articles of samsaric existence, or like the belongings of samsaric existence. And what does it mean? Actually, it refers like to all the things that we see in our daily life, like food, drink, houses, like so forth, like all these things. And by kind of, if we can have being kind of satisfied like with what we have and not having like very great desires to this, so this is actually the practice of can be considered to be the practice of non-attachment. And what is happening is that if someone has very, very big desire for all of these things, houses, like all the material things that we see and so forth, so this is actually the cause for fighting and having disputes with each other and arguments with each other. This is actually what we can see and recognize as the root or the cause of all the different problems that we have in today's world, like having very, very kind of greediness and a lot of greedy attitudes and very, very big desire, like, yeah. And if we can practice like this kind of small desire for all of these things, so this is this is actually the practice of non-attachment.
Dochang Zayati Ketan Nachunani, Loshi Jahoring among Lori Dungan Tama, Loshi Zachio, or Telejapiori, the Loshi Yatankar is in a penanato chalachi chavi cups and dochati cups, pena metoya ponchintona, metotal Gacha Chundrisica Yapi Changiona, so Samlo ya Drotani Gacha Gayapos on Jacres, Sonzako, Zantangachani Peti Gacha Gaz. Yapozatana non-trixosari teachani loshi and zeni samlot or Kotata the colo yondin the tony, Tetamlan do pachena, do chaza comarino, till a drotani, Gachamombo ya permission, the teniti chetala, Dramanda leka chenitini, Nota Tomat, Leon Goritangason, Jankampansa, Nota Chenayo, Sachagatunda, Pancho Kutunda, Tam and Dopa chetala, Zawat Patesmon and Doparendo, Dopa Macani, control on control. Le control which let any Gavrita Leongo, Sonza and Docha Zayatan, Sonze Yapochi Cheton, and Yotamon, which is Gendra Pinto, the Shigiore.
Yes, so actually the attachment, this is something which is considered to be wrong consciousness. We talked about it like in the previous classes when we talked about the sevenfold division of the mind. So we talked about one consciousness and we said that attachment, it is considered to be one consciousness. So what is the reason? The reason is that when we are being attached to a certain object, let's take for example flower. So the flower in the reality, actually it can be, if we are talking about percentages, like just in order to exemplify, so we can say that this flower is 10% attractive, let's say, like just to give an example. So we can say that the flower is 10% attractive. But what happens is that with attachment, so we perceive that flower to be 100% attractive. And when we perceive like the flower to be 100% attractive, we just kind of superimpose, we just kind of exaggerate the qualities of the flower. And therefore it is considered to be wrong consciousness because the way of grasping at the object is totally mistaken. It is not in accordance with reality. So this is what we call like one consciousness. And actually, if we can just grasp at the object and consider it to be just as it is in terms of its quality, for example, if the flower has like this and this type of attractiveness, so grasping at the flower in accordance to the reality, to how much attractive or not attractive it is, if you can have this type of mind, so this much the attachment and the one consciousness are not arising. But if we kind of grasp at the qualities of the objects to be more than they actually are, so this is when like all the different kind of attachment and one consciousness they are arising. And actually what is happening is that when we are having like all the different type of attachment and one consciousness towards objects, so we are doing like different kind of actions, like being motivated by these emotions and by this attachment. And when we are doing all these type of actions, being motivated by such emotions, so all the type of problems in the world are coming out of it. So we are having at first like the attachment towards the object, and then based on that, like all different type of arguments and fights with each other comes based on it, and based on it comes anger and so forth. So if we can just cut like the root of which is like the attachment, so we can cut off these problems, and this is how much this is as much as benefit can come if we can cut the attachment.
Laso sonsa ta na bien so ken so na lo so ki kabla so le tanda yoya so yo chekare yo na te kitanga so ki gona goda gogrita ta tenin ro chi kan jikre samni so go sam lo ndo pa ta ma chunju ji che de na ma sel kale chonwa ta dewa ta kewa yori tili dote ta deyang al gogre muki deyang al gogre so le mogoya chi choni mena to so sama ge chet nyama revision da kali ja gore kali ja di te mandram ni control on chaton la ngar jalon ani sem sama antini kange che so sa na ja gen dan do chame pi samlo tel ka te nyamle chet na sem ko che po yon ate shiri yore.
Yeah, so therefore, of course, like that in the general livelihood in our life, we need like these different type of necessities, right? We need like the different types of thing in order to live and in order to survive and so forth. It doesn't mean that we don't need certain possessions and belongings. But what it means that what we need to do is that we need to practice a sense of contentment with what we have. We need to practice a sense of like small desires, like with regards to what we have. And if we can do it, so actually we can avoid, or we can avoid all these different types of problems, and we can actually increase the level of happiness and contentment in our life. So this is what will happen as a result of practicing contentment with what we have. But otherwise, if like we are not being contented with what we have, and instead of it, like we are saying, oh, I need this, and I need more than this, I need more than this, and so forth, having this type of attitude, so this is something that is going just to bring us much more problems, because what we are going to do is that we are going to day by day, we are going to strive like for these different things that we think that we need, or that we think that we want, and like striving and like doing many efforts like for these things that we think that we want. So eventually what will happen is that we are going to give rise to a lot of different kind of disturbing emotions, such as anger, greediness, pride, and so forth. So therefore, if we can cut its root, which is like the attachment, if we can kind of decrease the intensity of the attachment that we have, so what will happen is that we can keep a happy mind.
Lasotni yon chik chochini shenke gchina ndo paziat mena kenzo yargi la no rezini tindi shendo angoni injere panjo to so tindi dopamena tindi le kamombo chi tshon roatan panjo yaji manjo wala pensa gareta panjo yaji sona karpeng panjo yaji sona so dekhe kchetere panjo yaji ro mago niya sem ka locheni dekhe yon ayona te tege yonje garwa inchi munchi panjo yaji ro go ayomar Sud and Dramil, Deki Yongo, Deki Yon tapped Panjo Yaji Magic Yongo Yo Mari, so the same commonly, Lochena Deki Yongo, de Andricare Samudu.
Cefun circana the pleasure of the Yangore, Egypt, the Kinera, the Impecapa.
So till mine be till tablet logic, so Kepozo Yayona Kesarova.
Yeah, so in general, there is like this kind of saying in society that, of course, like that we need some kind of willing or desire in order to live or in order like to make livelihood. Otherwise, we won't be able to increase the financial aspect in our life, or we won't be able to to kind of earn money and so forth. So yeah, on the one hand, it's true, right? Like if you want to have like the kind of desire and not necessarily attachment, like it's quite confusing in English, but just like kind of a desire or like a certain willing. So it will be hard to kind of increase like these things. But I think that on the other hand, there is no such a necessity that in order like to gain happiness in our life, we need to have we need to have a lot of money, right? This is what I think, because in general, what we want to have is happiness. And if like we can find another type of method in order to have happiness, and not necessarily just like to earn a lot of money and a lot of material things, so I think it's also okay and it's much easier.
Voilà, ça tenait de tirer ta do chame pique sa zédia de tenir ci jacori ta kanga inando ba makivash. Tan do chame pata jerdan me pata tumu me pasam de water savignon mon ba chicken en leon do charger dans tumu zeni leon de chez on dit au côté en code de pondra chandovre.
Yes, so in general, this is the presentation of the mental factor of non-attachment. So after that, we are going to start to study about the non-hatred as well as the non-ignorance. So in the presentation of what is called the 6 root mental afflictions, so what is coming inside of them is the hatred, attachment, and ignorance. So if we gain a good understanding about these 3, the non-attachment, non-hatred, and non-ignorance, so as well we'll be able to gain a good understanding about the 3 opposite like root mental afflictions.
Tani jerdan me pisem jon zede ad kare jerdan ki yersamo kanrola mun jerdan ki wan jom cha no pa chan do pa so me pisem jon zeni tani son de ta jerdan me pas zena jerdan me pat ki ton zopare ta nga so na ki zopa gomgori zede at jerdan me pige sandal tik de gorindi jerdan ki yersam zeat dingar jandu semchem jandu dingar ke getan tarsam dal jandu wa tarsam le teni jetan ki go sa na bien at jetan me pas zo pa gom gore zeni jetan me pige sa te shegore.
Yes, so now we are going to head to the 5th mental factor, which is non-hatred. So the definition of the 5th mental factor, non-hatred, is this mental factor, upon perceiving any of the 3 objects that give rise to anger, destroys the arising of anger and reverses any wish to harm and so on. So, in general, the mental factor of non-hatred, basically we can understand it as meditating on passions, like the meditation of passions, and the non-hatred, we can understand it like to be similar. So, usually when we say like to meditate on passions, and so forth, so we refer to this, like to this kind of the essence or the nature of this mental factor, the non-hatred. And we say also, it is said in the text, that there are 3 objects that give rise to anger, which are sentient beings, suffering, and circumstances that product suffering. So, like any other like type of beings, suffering, and the causes for suffering, right? So, based on these 3, like the hatred is arising.
Aso tani ta tombo dingar le teni jetan ki ton karreziti dingar te jetan ki yonjig nan liandu yem de senyen jetan tite danjom so zenitene sondu karze go reziti ngatso mitel kange che on de tani control line bundus kange shunjom sonza kange zediat control kala ta wichi res aso kala zauna ya jaba chaungro tenanje dingar te cheon di control chik zagndus a dingar ke jechen dan cheon di yang control chik zayin bara dingar chena control zana tani semche jela ta control zada da nga so ha kora wa ta control za jechen ro ta kham da telin onze chendu
te dunga gigyu te kara
dungar koron kange chilera ta kange yon ki jechen ramanda yora chikare ina na sa ro ina chin ramanda jechen teni kange yora tali ya tsik baza go re semaso na sal tsik baza kange le tsik baza kanza le tsik baza teni samyores.
Yes, so now we are going to talk about the 3 types of objects that based on them the hatred or the anger is arises. So if you are talking about the suffering, like one of the causes which based on the anger is arises, so the suffering, this is the manner in which anger is arising based on suffering. It is something which is indicated in the text the Bodhisattva Way of Life, written by Shantideva. I cannot quote, I as a translator cannot translate exactly like the quote from the Shantideva's book, but in general, it means that based on like different difficulties that we experience in our life, so we are going to give rise like to anger, like we are kind of being mad because of like different kind of adverse or like difficult circumstances that we meet in our life. And we can also think about this kind of we can also think about this kind of different circumstances, such as like
Kala na jita yema devi seze ya titerwa.
and like by and what is going to happen, so we're going to have kind of an uneasiness of mind, so we're going to have kind of being frustrated, and the frustration, we can think about it as kind of the food or the fuel of the anger. This is something which is kind of being indicated in this text. So this is like kind of what gives food like to the anger. And as for the other causes, so for sentient beings as being the cause of the anger, so this is something that we can all relate to, right? Like kind of being mad with other people and getting angry with other people. This is like the second type of cause. And the third type of cause, like the causes or the circumstances that based on suffering arise. So it will be an example such as having a sickness or a disease. So kind of being mad like with these kind of circumstances that brought us anger, like kind of being mad like with the disease that based on we have suffering.
Also, tani tanga tsu zopa nyamle che gore ta je da me bige sal nyamle che gore ze ketan wol ma zopa ti wotl konsa cho mu se che jendu da akar ze ti jirdan ze ti at nga tsu le kange ma to yonde ze at na chig ze che yo mare penan do chang ra wo chi nan do bi yer ta so so lo to wonde ne kap de ato va yori ina jirdang ma sosolo maike pazoya chi mato jedang terin ngal ke pochi zo son samba ni machi yo mare pena kondron de cha nyota lomba kanzo sandi chimata ti ngo tsaya kyon ra pancho ko kyon ra so re nenga chembo chi nan seri to ri che atria yongra mase anda otria chi a chunju chi na yang ta masa ina mitan ramandra la control ani chi na chima ngo tsaya ina yongre kyon baji mato te maze ta na so chashim pare ala so pinna sa maaz control teni yungu yoreze gore sonza naja gendel zo pa nyamle je tame pi samlo ta nyamle che at ha chang ke chemore.
So therefore, like we are saying, what we need to do is to practice patience. Like it is very, very important to practice patience. This is what we need to do. And in this book, so His Holiness is going to discuss about this topic of practicing patience a bit more in details, more down like in the book. So so in general, the anger or hatred, this is something that only brings us problems. This is something that doesn't have like any kind of good quality. There is no good quality like with getting angry or hatred. Because for example, as for attachment, so we can think of that in the short term, so it kind of gives me a certain kind of benefit, or this is something that can actually make me happy, like in the short term, like having like the sense of attachment. But with anger, this is not like that at all. When we have anger, so what it's going to do is that we are not going to be happy at all. This is something that like being motivated like by this kind of action we are going to do. So being motivated by this type of emotion, by this type of disturbing emotion of anger, we are going to do different kind of negative actions, such as killing people maybe, or like fighting with people. And after that, what we are going to have is just kind of being embarrassed, like of the situation that we got into because of being motivated by anger. So apart from like faults, there is nothing that we can see like positive, like in anger. And also above that, so like we can also think like in terms of how anger brings like different diseases and kind of harms our physical health also. And so therefore the practice of patience becomes extremely important.
Asatani jedam me pigesta zo pi korte wotele chi yonzo sa tenin chi internet tum me pigesta zetiat karazina tum zetiat nga zur monde ya chi nok tum to ve tonda karina machine ma tum jo ya tni chi la tum ja te ndu sonta tum me pigesta nga zo sem de katina tonda karal kona sem sarbon ro yo pala de shirap tan tni chapar te yo zere shirab tan tezi kyapar yo pandre she de gore manga chena shirab yin de chindu karzan zokke ina de shirab yin la bor lobo yin ga de taran tumu me bige sa shirab le la ra ina de tanda she de ata patome kundi gu she pa samna je chena tumu de shirab ra mare ta pa tonda karle ina te sarbo naktu tu remro pa pa tamo de nga so sem ka tama ji ora otni chigla ngo je gore so topi shirab ki chala takpa ziti shirab la takpan raw chima to shirab ngoni mare zini tombo papa tome kundo patnire.
Yes, so now we are going to we are going to move to the mental factor of non-ignorance. So ignorance is in general, like what does it mean? It means like not being able to understand any type of meaning, like that our mind is not being able to understand like any kind of thing. So this is like what is being referred to ignorance. So here, like when we are talking about the mental factor of non-ignorance, so in general, this is something which is very, very similar to wisdom, very, very similar to what we call also a discriminating awareness. We can think about it like as something which is very, very similar. And also in the text Abhidharma Kosha, written by Acharya Vasubandhu, so actually he posits these two to be the same. The mental factor of non-ignorance and the wisdom, like to be actually like the same thing. But here, this book is kind of based on the text of the Arya Sangha, the Compendium of Knowledge, the text of Arya Sangha, the Compendium of Knowledge, and in this text he posits the mental factor of non-ignorance to be a bit different than wisdom, because not like wisdom, like actually this kind of mental factor, it is something which has like the aspect of investigative wisdom, but is not actually wisdom. It is more like kind of clear mind, but not wisdom itself.
Patome ke semjong ngap chenga chi jare ta ina lopo yin ke je je chung mong ma ja ni semjong ngat dinan li yo ma re ya chik tan da temu me bi ke sa ya temu me bi ke sa lo papa lopo yin ke kar che ni ma ja re temu me bi ke sa se te kon de she pi shira ran res shira ran yin son ta shira ko los ma she pa yin zini te she ore papa tome na lopo yin ke ge wa chama to ge cha chi she o ma re o ka sa ge ni ngat
Yes, so for example, in the text of Arya Sangha, the Compendium of Knowledge, so he indicates 51 mental factors, and also this book as well is indicating 51 mental factors. And in the text of Acharya Vasubandhu, the Abhidharma Kosha, so he indicates 46 mental factors, 5 less than Arya Sangha. And the reason is, so one of the mental factors that is missing in Acharya Vasubandhu's text, the Abhidharma Kosha, is the very mental factor that we are talking about, the non-ignorance, because he considered non-ignorance and a wisdom to be the same thing, actually, to be equivalents, and therefore he doesn't indicate like a kind of an extra mental factor. And also in his text, he's indicating 10 virtuous mental factors, not like Arya Sangha that indicates like 11 virtuous mental factors.
That's what 11,
the last thing.
So the last 11. So 11 virtuous. Sorry. Virtuous mental factors.
Thank you.
Tanda Tati yewa teang kasa shirab le ketop ta gyorchoni jana jinde tumu me bigesa la yang taran yewa te ketop ta gyorchoni jandu ngaso ma tombo ni kewa ngami go leg top ki go tombo ma ke on ni ripa korotam ma sapot ndi yonjo chi yores yang sender lob jon chewala tini so so ripa sari ndo ni shicha karle na mormo wicha gontum munjoa go tindi go yonden chi yores tandri so so nyamnyo la savlo to na shirab ta koni popo yin ge sia na je chikban de jum ge samnum go so shiran charma to ni ro chi resha ta counter papa tomic teze so yo chikta yerta la sabon ro chi la jakore chikta peti yerta pa shirab sia ta pa yin da man ta che to ni te som to che tindi ge chani jakore ni chabar chi ni che yore
Yeah, so here in the definition of non-ignorant, actually in the text it's calling like non-delusion. I just translated it as non-ignorance, but in the text it's called non-delusion, this mental factor. And in its definition, it says like it depends on its cause, like of the non-delusion. Like the non-delusion dependent on its cause, and its cause is whether innate or generated wisdom. So there is like the innate wisdom and generated wisdom. This is something that was presented in the previous classes as kind of like the divisions of wisdom. So there is like the innate wisdom and there is the generated wisdom. So what do we mean by saying innate wisdom? Innate wisdom is referring to the wisdom which was gained actually in past life, and by the mental imprints or the karma of past life, we give rise like to this wisdom in the present life. Like we have the result of having wisdom and clear mind in the present life based on like what we studied and like the wisdom that we developed in past life. So this is what we call the innate wisdom. And the generated wisdom, this is something that actually in this life, by studying and making effort, so we develop our wisdom, and as well we develop like the clarity of our mind with regards to things. So this is what is called generated wisdom. And actually, when we're thinking about it, when we try to think about it, so it is very, very hard like to give, like to kind of think about wisdom and non-delusion, the mental factor of non-delusion or non-ignorance, as different things, right? Because like, for example, in the presentation of Acharya Vasubandhu in the Abhidharma Kosha, so he says like these are like the similar things, and actually thinking otherwise, this is very, very hard like to think like, oh, this is wisdom and this is like the mental factor of non-delusion. This is how to think about them differently. But here, Arya Sangha is positing them differently by saying that the first one, the mental factor of non-delusion, this is a kind of a clear mind. It has like the essence of mere clear mind, but it's not like wisdom, which can also kind of cut off the doubts that we have, and to cut off the doubts and like being like very precise like with regards to what it investigates. So there is like this difference that the Arya Sangha is positing, and that therefore it is being posited differently.
Last tandal gave Sawasundal concert of Jigdom round in Docha me patan, Jerdan me partumu me pis him John Duxon, gave it to Tamcha Gisawat and Yip Tamchango Pitavia on the Tangasu, against us someone the Yamle Chetona, so Kitan gave us it at Terniet Johnston to the Gavatan Devanichi Pari. This will allow it in a decade younger raise Keshanji, Deki Kajan Sonsa, a Gavala or the two songs of Deki Sama Savan or Chateorella, as well Messenal non to Mishoriagayon, Tabiona Menachires, so Docha me pata, Shetan me pata, Tumu me pickets and Yatabanyam Leche Denizina, Messenal non to Yansho Marilla, Sembaya Kipo Yungari, Yantapa Semba to Magova, and Docha men and Chatola Sopa Yungumaris, Docha Chatola Sopa and Dochani Yon de the movement that Tesum to Zagmari, Jerdamena Semchunikangi Momboch Chegmara, or Sonza, de Chikasawa, Tanyungo, Pitavuna, Mena give Savanda some race on do. Martagandu.
Okay, so there is like a kind of a summary that His Holiness put at the end of this section, which is discussing about the three virtues and mental factors, the three type of root virtues, mental factors. So it is said in the book, the three mental factors, non-attachment, non-hatred, and non-delusion, are the roots of all virtuous qualities. They are the means of stopping all bad conduct. So actually this is true. So when we are saying like virtues, so actually this is something which is unique to the Tibetan language. So virtues in Tibetan language, it is called gewa, and happiness in the Tibetan language, it is called dewa. So these like type of terms are very, very similar to each other, gewa and dewa. And what is the reason that they are similar to each other? So gewa, the virtues, it is the cause of happiness, dewa. So therefore they are kind of very, very same, like in its in terms of language. So if we practice virtuous action, so the result will be happiness. So the kind of practicing these three wood virtuous mental factors, these three wood virtuous mental factors of non-attachment, non-hatred, and non-delusion. So this is actually becomes one of the best methods in order to avoid a different kind of mistakes. Because if we really engage in such practice, so we'll always be happy, our mind won't be disturbed all the time, we'll avoid like kind of unnecessary mistakes in our life. And because if we have like this different kind of like these opposites, like the anger, attachment, and delusion, so out of having anger, out of having attachment, so we're going to have like all different kind of problems that attachment brings together with, and out of like being angry and like having hatred, so we know what are the faults, and we are going to have all different kind of problems that comes together with anger. And if we are going to have a lot of delusion, so we'll always like have like doubts in our mind. So practicing these three, this is actually something which is very, very helpful and beneficial in our life.
아니 나서 덤바 존지제야 될 만조이 다 존지 테즈 고 데포레 존지가 뭐바다 게임 자라면 이제 나서 게위고 초코 자와 지금 거래 뭐야 경고 초코 자와 지금 뭔게 나 존지제마 존지제야 될 게임 초라 스토아 슈우칭게 될 바츠 첸도 슈우요 사 삼바 든지 지금 라그레제 워
Yeah, so now we are going to talk about diligence, the next mental factor, the diligence.
raison
So we're going to talk now about diligence. So what is the definition of diligence? The mental factor consists of completely joyous mental state that is focused on virtuous activity. The focal object of diligence, it must be kind of a virtuous activity. Otherwise, it is not something that just like kind of in a general sense, like any kind of object that we focus on and we strive for, or like we make efforts for. It is not considered to be diligence. Diligence must be something that is focusing on a virtuous kind of action on object and making efforts in order to accomplish this and so forth.
Sonsa nga so pena chamba ta ninje la so pa gomba na gi gomdin tel stona shiuchi yo tanji tel mbetso che de ni tel zonji zegre mo tel jamba so che an rawo chi lo mbetso shiuchi tni na te zonji mare te ma ze chin khang ba le an rawo talam le an rawo tanji le an mbetso shiuchi de te zo le an zonji la ma zonji ti yin chi men che ge yu cho cha ya po chi lo mbetso che lo chi lo zonji ja khore sonsa de zonji to gewa chegna se jakhori ketan te chik pa chik jang sambat gema ke loma ten chamali ngor pina socho palangaji soche al shiu gapoche ni telba soche de ni yore kashi ketan ni lekan rawo chi kamba zo an rawo talam le an rawo te somba soche de ni chure te sol leka loma ten rawo re gewa rezi ayo mar mo gewa rezi ande yin chi mu chik cham nyang ji go mala so pa ta so le ta la so pa tendi gewi chula But so de nyang samlo chi go yore zonji ti yin chimon chi dikap ko zonji de.
Yeah, so for example, if someone is striving or being very, very diligent with, for example, meditating on love and compassion, and someone like have like kind of great joy by engaging in this type of actions, this is what we call diligence. Someone which is kind of striving like to the direction of virtuous actions. So this is what we call diligence. Otherwise, like this is not, we cannot kind of give the term diligence for someone who is engaging in actions such as killing other people or just like kind of building houses and constructions. So this is not considered to be the virtuous mental factor of diligence. It must be engaged, it must be towards the direction of a virtuous type of action or virtuous direction. Because in general, so of course that we can kind of use kind of in a general sense, like this term, like with whatever type of action, like whether it's something which is non-virtuous, whether it's something which is a kind of a neutral action, and whether it's something which is a virtuous action. For example, like, if someone like is kind of very, very diligent or like very, very kind of striving for the purpose of killing other people, so we can say like in general that he strives like to like with this kind of action. And if someone is just kind of very, very diligent or making a lot of efforts for building houses, so we can say that that he's kind of striving with this type of neutral action. But here in this context, diligence must be something which is towards like kind of virtuous direction, such as love, kind of meditating on love, generating love, or practicing generosity, and so forth. It must be towards this type of direction.
sonza no tende de chire zonji de tatal yewa tar nga ro chi jandu tat chinde shi chi gyamna parchin de kundu tombo tal kochi zonji de kundu kochi zonji de at tati chi an ro re pena nga nyanjin chi kom sam tombo kon nyanji gomdol zonji ro shu chi le ni gomdon ro twa shu chi le na tel kochi zonji de wo tati ro chi tani kochi zonji de ndo kocha de at nga so kocha 고야요 주데레 다 동보 자르체야들 니제로 지고미야나 다 게비자와 가리나 몸을 자르체야들 고치 존지제 오르들 가보체야 이니 니파들 요리 존지제 고 레카데 제비캅스 파 준토토야지 통 아니 준토토아즈 마제텔 기잡요피 고니체 토아지 마다 노멘라오다 기잡메 파트리 마체와게타 기브조타 타우조르 존지제네 니 Tenishchigla Tani, Joy Sondize de at Tajaktu, Tombonitri, Tate Sundajimati.
Tambo to Chavatel and
Musanjiman, Nel, Tatin Rochi, or Talstoashi, which Tangi Nijikoma, Capon Rotam, Gomdo Shuchi Leayora, or Taylor, Cochitondize over.
Yeah, so now in the text it posits the divisions for this mental factor, the diligence. So, yeah. There are like 5 different divisions for this mental factor. So I'm trying to find it in text. Yeah, when categorized, the diligence has 5 types. So the first type is the diligence of armoring, like armor. My R is a bit. Do you understand? Armor.
Amor?
Armor. Like
armor.
When you put armor.
So armor.
Yeah. So the first type is the diligence of armoring. This is like how it is said in the text. And what does it mean? It means like before engaging in the actual type of virtuous activity, before you kind of make certain preparation. For example, if you're going to engage in meditation of compassion and so forth, so at first you generate a kind of sense of joy, or kind of meditating on compassion, like kind of having a sense of joy and willing to engage in this action. So this is the first one. The second one is what we call the diligence of application. So the diligence of application has 2 types. The first type of diligence of application is kind of carrying whatever type of virtuous action. This is actually the diligence of application. So the first one was kind of the prior engaging in the actual activity. And the second one is when you actually engaging in the activity. This is the diligence of application. And the diligence of application, it has the 2 aspects. And one is a kind of whatever virtuous activity that you engage with, so you kind of carry it for long time, continuously. So this is the first one. And the second one has the aspect of kind of having a certain sense of respect, or a certain sense of respect towards this kind of a virtuous activity that you are engaging with. So these are the first 2 divisions.
Somebody Mongol is on the Tanga so ni general when you top a gongosh, but it's saving to the Chani Tandro, Chendro, Tendrimo, but Trosim Chimbugoni Montani Gomtoala, Mongol is on this over any. Let's ni general which you go me the Mejangata, Tendriche, Dena Keoma, Calicati is in Mejangi, Parchin Roche, Parchi Kamatoani, Pentoyo and Arul Pingres and Tia Sondricena, Mordopis on this theatretani, Tamatal Chopper Munzambit, Chopper Munzabazina, Tanandrix on a tongue in Egyptachi com Sayan, Tandrix on Tajan and Ricasama, Tendrimon, Mayimba, Tani Pagomia, or Tendrigo Mandravando, Nandri Jacanduta, Leka Chicken, Gomji Paramundare.
Yeah. So now we are going to discuss about the 3 left, the 3 other divisions, like in the division of diligence. So the third type of division is it's called the diligence of non-discouragement. And what does it mean? It means that when we are engaging in a kind of a virtuous activity, so we may have the feeling of I'm getting tired, or kind of feeling of being discouraged. So by not being discouraged and kind of having this kind of joyful mind of continuing to keep engaging in this virtuous action, so this is actually this type of diligence. This is what it is referring to, not being discouraged and just to keep with a joyful mind to engage in this type of action. And then the fourth kind of division, it is called the diligence of non-reversal. And what does it mean? What may happen is that when we are engaging like in a virtuous action, such as meditating on compassion and practicing like all these kind of virtuous things, so other people may come and kind of intentionally or non-intentionally like may put like hindrances or obstacles for us by saying like, oh, what you're doing is like it's not so important, like you can give up on it and do like something else. So by not being under the influence of these kind of obstacles that others may put for us, so this is the application of the diligence of non-reversal. And then the fifth kind, this is the what's called the diligence of non-indolence. So yeah, it just means that, for example, we may reach a state in which we say, oh, like I did like so many virtuous actions, now it's okay, like now I'm fine, I'm satisfied like with what I did. So not having like this type of a lazy mind, just kind of keep striving and doing like virtuous action. So this is like the practice of the fifth type of division of the diligence.
Last of the Tuni Japa Shigan there, Sindrojaro, a Shingan Zedeate, give Sema gave Mupala Chatandopa, quote the wrong lodging shop, John's or Litan Sem Ning, Jopi Sem Jones, Sandy suit, not so tanda, not so yellow Shingan at Yoris in a parche, Yori lab, or in Zokani Yoris in Itachi, Takandino Yoris in Kemeris. In I am not so Petro Menjochi Chani Deore. Xinjiang zayat ngoni leona sembam shul holo chani semba gichi gomra jaw kanri chena kali chuni me semba lolo chandro zubole kange me patri chi zoyong yore te chang Xinjiang zayat nga sol tanda yore zina tanda yona yang pecho menjo chita nyamni de yonjo chi ma to lekat cheto yo mare ta yore zayat lopo papa tome lopo yingen yore la papa tome ke pachi yote yola wasari ina kor leka ngoni te che yona Xinjiang ngoni ko tsedan dembaji to ona gomja vikasa su gomja pile karenda gomja vikasa parishini gom yerimbo kaze jamna semle akanga me lipole akama deton reni de semjonji le ayore otel Xinjiang lab de ore
This is a gomja de
semle kanga me banga son tanda Xinjiang to me sans gomja jana parishi tandre che semba kale chewa teletene zupole na tsandra otan kalendra changdo odanda Xinjiang oni go Listen Xinjiang Zedeat Tobiona, Semba Yankange Minimani, some Gomkati Jabjana, Semba Yankange Mancheva, Zupolion Natsatan and Rotendichakame, Zupo de Hano, Jia, what the Jig Telea, your Xinjiang Moni to Tonatini, Lekangonichi on Atinichigo Wore.
Yeah, so the definition, okay, so now we are going to move forward to the next mental factor, the eighth one, which is the mental factor of pliancy. So this mental factor sets a tendency in the mind stream that enables the mind to become serviceable in focusing on a virtuous object exactly as desired, and that interrupts the continuum of bodily and mental dysfunction. So what does it mean? In general, it is said that in the Abhidharma Kosha, the text of Acharya Vasubandhu, it is said that we all have this kind of pliancy, this mental factor of pliancy. In the text of Arya Sangha, the Compendium of Knowledge, it is not indicated directly, but most probably Arya Sangha is also kind of asserting that this is something which is common to all of us, this type of mental factor. Actually, though it is said that we have this kind of mental factor of pliancy, this is something that we are kind of not employing or not using like in our daily life. This is something that we are not kind of employing or like kind of putting into work, this kind of a mental factor of pliancy. So what does it mean having this mental factor of pliancy? Pliancy, it means that like our mind is very, very relaxed, like having like very, very relaxed mind and being able and serviceable in terms of like doing like different actions of the body and the mind and not being tired of it, or like not being kind of tired or like feeling a kind of heaviness or like certain kind of difficulties. Because for us, like if we try to meditate, let's say like for a while, so very, very quickly we are going to feel like tired, or we're going to feel like very, very like a lot of difficulties because of like kind of engaging in such actions. So actually, if one wants like to have takel is also the shinjan putta to she
Shijang, Shijang oni to top song, Lisem la Kang Choni make channel race.
Yes, so
Gom Katsi Jamna, Gom Javi Kabla Zerita, Gom Katsi Jamna, Lisem la Kang make channel race.
yes, so if one actually has like the high quality, what we say like kind of high quality or very very good quality of this type of mental factor of pliancy, so however like how much time one will meditate or engage like in such actions, he won't like face any kind of difficulties, or he won't feel like kind of heaviness of the body or the mind, or won't feel like tiredness. Like someone can be very very serviceable and employ like the body and the mind as he wants. So this is like if one really have like the actual type of mental factor of pliancy, one can reach like this kind of stage.
Sonza Tanga so, not so with Gelati, Yang the Yo Pachita, Sabota, which Mungatanda Pecho Tomatashitani, get them to Gomia Pojavni, Katina, Gomjauto Natam, Gomia Pochana, Parashitani, Kalikuni, Richando, Ritatela. Xinjiang de le Ketan Yuan de Li Xinjiang de Sem Xinjiang in Xian du Tayina, Li Xinjiang de Kandi Shapi Xinjiang de Mare, Li Xinjiang de Liga Riachan de Chilijati Ore, Sem Xinjiang de Kandi Shapi Xinjiang, Tatanika Yuan Concentrocodinal, Kiwani, some Shirians in a sound of Wallace, Liga Chani Panal, Dujimato, Janeta Guntazo, Kenda Jepa Chil, when the Tanal Yongore. What he cable Jachi come the long see with the Soju Chashi Mugwachi.
I guess it's so the government and
Tanda, Sabunda watching at Soyo Pachi, Tandati, Musumea to Lisem Gomjana Kangindua, Gomjatona, Pajikan Mea Chandra Wotari, Tatala Yevat Lisem Shanjaniche, the Chaperto Walma, huh?
Yes, so we all have, we can say, like this kind of seed of this mental factor of pliancy. This is something that we all have, but we are not we are not able yet to employ or like to kind of put it into function. Because what the state that we are having like right now is that when we try to engage in virtuous actions or meditating, we become tired or like facing difficulties very, very quickly. But if someone is meditating, like and actually practicing very, very well, so at the end he'll be able to reach such a stage like to kind of having this mental fact of pliancy present like within him, like to have like to obtain like this mental factor of pliancy. This is something that one can attain and then not experiencing like any kind of difficulty or problem or like feeling tired or heaviness in terms of the body and the mind when one is engaging in virtuous actions and meditation and so forth. So here there are like two divisions of this mental factor of pliancy. There is the pliancy of the body and there is the pliancy of the mind. So the pliancy of the body, this is something which is kind of referring more to a type of, we can call it like kind of tactile object of the body, like kind of, we can maybe call it like physical sensation. This is like what is being referred to the pliancy of the body. But what is indicated more here, like specifically in this context, this is the pliancy of the mind. And yes, so at the chapter, like in the chapter 12, in the 12th chapter of this book, so the difference between these two is going to be explained thoroughly. And then like also in this context, it is going to be in the context of like the instructions of the meditation of calm abiding and so forth. But now there is no need to do very comprehensive investigation and differentiation between these two.
As Tani ta Kaman Chimato Mandu, John Rayo Nayo Manan, Tajana Yasari, Chetan Drotunas, Sondan Drotomas or Chachik.
Yes, so now we only have like 1 minute. So actually I thought that it will be good if you can cover all these virtuous mental factors, but we don't have enough time. So if you have questions, so you can bring them and we can discuss about it.
John Rayo, just a tragic on the Tani,
Yeah, so if you have a question, so you can ask the questions. And
So my question is, when we talk of the practice of patience, how do you distinguish experientially between suppressing an emotion and practicing patience, like suppressing the anger versus practicing patience.
So I'll just ask because it's a bit difficult to translate it. So what do you mean by saying suppressing the anger?
When I say suppressing it, it's to kind of deny or push down an emotion. Generally speaking, if I'm angry and I'm having a physical response and like thoughts, I will try to push it down, I'll try to deny it, or suppressing would indicate that. So I'm trying to understand what patience actually means in practice.
That's what that is. Good. The kan sawara te pokela tani mixer vayana na shingina. Ta chiratan te sopegoni amne chetangi korra te tiwashigre. Da so te sopegoni amne chetangi korla te sopa te kande ngone te kandes ni amne chegoyome te koni gitiwa ngone tere. Ina yang te kon te yewa chegosa te karereserna. Ta chik te karereserna perna te controlanto. Ani te contra te metodo na shincene te par yuk patsam mato te na ngosu kanslavare te chichena sopa mare te kana cosa
re control pa kotu manjang jaje atre te til tabla jamba chi yori la re
kanslavare ta perna te suso controlanto ta con yewa mi java nina shinsamson ani chikte te sopegon yan chetantere shenpate te kareresana soso controlanto ani tela te donle te put takpoten ngune machapache te pariuk patsamna shin
tele tronjor control troya treva troya zina ta chi control me o tabl pugi chlo ko jekin te solo yornin roja mi chu baza sha ching thona tamanton iche te telaqam nin ro teni rewe
Yeah, so for example, when you mean kind of to deny the anger, so it will be something like kind of try to avoid the anger and like to kind of to turn to like external things in order like to forget about the anger or just like not encountering with the person. Like, will it be something like this? Like when you are saying like kind of suppressing the anger?
Yeah.
Re ketan ni zopa gombi kapsa tal zopi mukpa lagra zopi mukpa la yor ketan tablam chi mare ta zia yo mare te yang chi jikore te yor sona so zo control mayon ayongu yora ina ya control zopa gombi machi na sut a control on a kar peng tel samlo tangore control on chi kan peng mare so lo nogore jan lo nogore kangal kangi zo ke chi ma chumre chi kan yo mare a control malo ni telita jamba Nakyogu konita chi mandri na yang kecha yaposhe tamlam yapochi le teni jamba tacho che arata te nyota mayon che te maona utuna takinaje ko troni roja na ndriyor yorni ro mupa la yor zegri te mupa de mayon te ndriyor ma to su control zoba go tabla monit control ni muktater control on pendo karandu san tif shola savla tater te pendo kaya me ba hakojend te te samlo tanto gora ro Jonreching Thomson, what is it?
Thomson and Itamar.
No, that they purchase that in them Togora, John Shuching Tonta, Pentocomari, Natsubazan, Pentocomari, some to your Pochi Haton, and Atsunavi Bazani, Shuji Jeji on Ashar Degra.
So, in general, the method of kind of try just to avoid the anger. So, this is actually something which is not in contradiction with the practice of patience because sometimes this is actually a valid type of method in order to kind of avoid the situation of getting angry, just like kind of to avoid the situation and not encountering like with the object that we are getting angry with. So this is actually something which is considered to be a valid type of method sometimes. But the essence or like the main practice of patience. So what is this? The practice of patience is seeing the faults of getting angry. By seeing the faults of getting angry, so kind of to avert the anger or like to put an antidote to the anger. Because what we can ask ourselves is that, like I'm angry now. Is it something which is beneficial for me or not? Is it something which is helping me or not? And then if we'll try to answer about this question, so the answer that we'll find is that no, actually what happens is that this is something which is only a negative for me. This is something which is only harming me as well as others. Like there is no any benefit like out of getting angry. So this is the real practice of patience, kind of trying to look at the different kind of faults aspects of the anger, and by looking just a second. Yeah, by looking at the different kind of faults of the anger. So if you can actually see the anger have a lot of faults, have a lot of like kind of negative qualities, so we'll be able also to shun or to avoid kind of generating or like to give rise to anger in our mind. And in general, if you can see like the negative aspects of the anger and the faults of the anger, so then also what we can do is to try to find the different kind of methods in order to deal with the situation. So we'll be able to, for example, to approach the other person and try to have like a good conversation with them, and then slowly like to solve the situation. And yeah, but in general, the method of just trying to kind of avoid like the situation or the person that we are getting angry with, this is actually a valid method that may be helpful sometimes.
That's how didn't have serious.
Okay, this is like that, yeah. So
Yeah, go on.
yeah, so if we don't have any other questions, so we can finish.
Yeah.
I do have a quick question.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, if I want to be pliant, then that means I need to overcome my negative afflictions, my tiredness, my sleepiness, my low energy. The pliancy in my mind and pliancy in my body will help that, correct?
The mental tiredness, the physical tiredness.
Physical tiredness, sleepiness, mental sleepiness.
So if you overcome on this, so you'll be able to achieve pliancy. This is what you're saying?
Yes. Yes, that's my question.
So
So pliancy is the kind of the antidote to restlessness. Pliancy is like the antidote to restlessness or tiredness or non-resiliency.
ta kelti soso te shinjang togdoyo paina ta te soso te suku tanchea ta suku te kanislavara le kachemitubia ta sem te nyokto chak chok chok tende netan tezo gogorpa tezo kagorpa te chiritane shinjang serete te tezo nienpo double chagiorpa penas te sem te nyokto chagia ta suku te tanchea tenderpe de shinjang te tezo nienpo chagiorpa sa
di kati shena nyembo ro shen do ate yana tombo ko Xinjiang de yaso to gore ma to Xinjiang de gomjam ni so gore nga so gomjam da nga ron de na te tanda thome cham shi go na ko so shi gomja shenke ge shena pa ya gomjam ni jarne ziyada to mondi tanda jala zamje ki tangin ze na ma chung lisem Xinjiang ge tangin ze ziyada to ben jarne ziyada to e toba ni zonte tani ko kangi ta sopa senro atani chikle ge yore ze wore tikal ko topsana kangi ngi mbondro ama to tanda ngel batsondo chi chena ma to ko yo mara tani ro chire
te tema to parto te kanete somepa
chakmari ko koro jondar rchi cheni jondar kan thal len jondar chire tamdo dina na so jikshan rchi lo yondi tombo jiksha lo tikale parshi jikdina kale me and rchi chando te da chikban rchi re tanda gom jab de parshi ni lisem sama de arindro nyama dunjel gom jan de dina kaya to me atri shegndo
So in general, like in a general sense, we can say that this is kind of the antidote for these kind of states, like the physical tiredness or like the mental tiredness and so forth. In general sense, we can say it is like this. But actually, this is something that is being achieved and obtained only by the practice of meditation. So speaking honestly, I don't have I didn't achieve the mental factor of pliancy. This is something that I didn't achieve myself. But in general, this is something that by by the practice of meditation. So eventually one can achieve the state of calm abiding, which is also called shamatha and so forth. In Tibetan it's shina. So then when one achieves like that, one achieves calm abiding in his mental stream. So one also achieves like this type of mental pliancy and physical pliancy. So and then one can kind of a lot of problems will be solved, or a lot of problems will be removed by achieving like this kind of state. So but the thing is that only when one is achieving like this type of mental pliancy and the physical pliancy, only when one finally achieves them, so these different kind of problems that you talked about, the physical tiredness and the mental kind of dullness and so forth, only then it is going to be eliminated or removed, like this type of problems. Because we can also, this is something, we can also think about it like, just like for example, as practicing in running. So when you practice in running, so at first this is something which is very, very difficult, running, right? This is something which is very, very difficult, like at the first time, like when you just start training yourself and so forth. But then when you train yourself enough, and then eventually you reach a state in which like all the different kind of problems that you faced at the beginning are not going to be present anymore, because you reach like kind of a very, very high stage, or like very good quality of practice of running. So this is the same manner with regards to meditation. So at first, like when you're meditating, we are going to experience all these different kind of problems, like of getting tired easily and like having mental dullness and so forth. But if you're going to practice enough, eventually we'll be able to reach such a stage which we don't face this kind of problems. So if we kind of put it briefly, we can say that in general, it is the antidote, but it is the antidote in the sense that only when you achieve like this kind of state, so it functions as the antidote for all these type of problems. And up until then, so we are going to experience these problems. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
yeah. So yeah, just
How is frustration and anger differentiated?
Mi dewa t'incontro io candes chegora.
Kadia.
Mi dewa t'incontro ni candes chegora.
Yamatewa zeta saulo makiwa rantri. Control zeta teni pasok chimuga ya lapart kan wachi ora. Tawas semdri chimakya teni michigletan dinga chingri maso samba ine ya jike karchina teni semyapa ya kan wachi ora tel control awar. Yamatewa makiwa rantri.
Yeah, so when we were saying frustration, so it means it refers more like to the state of mind of just being unhappy with a certain situation. But when we are talking about anger, it's kind of being full, like with kind of I don't know how to translate it exactly, but kind of being full with not liking. If I translate it literally, but kind of being full with like kind of.
Is there a difference in intensity?
I'll just finish to translate and maybe it will be clear for you. So, so actually like the anger, this is something which arises like based on different causes and conditions, such as like we kind of encounter with the person that is going like to make us angry, and then like we are going to be filled like with this kind of sense of like not liking, or like kind of being, let's say like having like repulsion, like, or like being aversion, exactly, aversion. Being full of aversion, so.
Tanda yamadewa zeyati yuki semjo tsorwa sini kasanga tsornyam la chingdo sari tinal yaja ore kontro zeyati muki zaynyo mon patrikanal maja ore kuni mandra shiyore.
So for example, what we call the frustration, this is something that, so actually in English, like the term imidewa, it is translated into frustration, but also can be translated as like unhappy mind. Like these two, like when translating, like it's kind of equivalent. So the unhappy mind, this is part of the division of the mental factor of feeling, which we discussed about in the previous classes. Like this is one of the divisions of feeling. And as for anger, this is one of the divisions of 6 root mental afflictions.
6 root.
Is it okay? Because you, okay?
Yeah. The question is it a degree of intensity?
Te gana te tivasem pe tanso. Ta control ta imi dewa te chechungi gone te yo cheno digire.
다 직도 초란라고 지라 직도 당셈 지라 마셔라 노셈라고 지 컨트롤제한테 파쇼라 노셈 요거라 잠바 예모데아제한테 초와랑 레마도 텔라 노셈라고 든지 캬바리 요 말이
So the first one we can think about like kind of a certain feeling, like a certain feeling. And the second one we can think about it like in the sense of like,
노셈 제사리 컨트롤 노셈 거리 마셔리 저 바키 독사
and the second one, like the anger, this is something which is actually like having like the mind of aversion, or in more than that, like having like the mind which wishes like to harm like another person, like having like this mind, the harmful mind, this harmful intention, like towards someone. This is how you pose it, like.
샤스
Okay.
니자게 듣고 까마 정아 대바리송
Yeah, okay, so now we need to finish because we're already like 15 minutes, like more than the class planned to be. So,
남바 상마티치
okay, so I want to say to everyone, thank you very much.
나스 니자자로
Okay, yeah, so now we're finished. Thank you. And also I want to say like in the name of this organization, the name of the group, Shida. So basically this group is being kind of totally donation based. So we don't have like, yeah, this is totally donation based, like this kind of group. And if you want like to help like the different type of, the different teachers that live here, like in order to maintain their livelihood and to be able to keep teach here. And yes, so we will appreciate if you want to give a certain donation. Here like there is the donation box, so you can make a donation if
And
you want.
Mansur says, yes, please.
Oh, okay.
라스 드니 교소 페퍼 카티치 인드날용
Okay, yes. So,
지마티츠요나 페로치
yes, so I want to say very, very, like, thank you very much that you came here to my class. And if you have time in the future, so please come once again. Okay.
야
Oh.